My family tried to take my house, but I made the bank take it from them instead. That sentence sounds cold when you say it out loud, doesn't it? Like something a bitter old woman would spit out in anger. But let me tell you something, child. There's a difference between bitterness and clarity. I'm not bitter. I'm just awake now. Awake to what people will do when they think you're too old, too tired, too trusting to fight back. That little house on Maple Street wasn't just wood and brick to me. It was 43 years of love, sacrifice, and memories. And my own blood tried to steal it from under my feet. But before they could celebrate their victory, I made sure no one would ever live in those walls again. Not them. Not me. No one. Welcome, my dear. This is Grandma Alice Stories, where every tale carries a lesson and every wound carries wisdom. Pull up a chair, pour yourself some tea, and settle in close, because today's story isn't easy to tell, but it's one that needs to be heard. Life has a strange way of teaching us who people really are when they think we're not looking. And sometimes, the hardest lessons come from the ones we love most. I bought that house in 1981 with my husband, Robert. We were young then, well, younger, and so full of hope it practically spilled out of us. Robert worked double shifts at the factory, and I cleaned houses during the day, watched neighbors' children at night. We saved every penny. I remember the day we got the keys. Robert picked me up and spun me around in that empty living room, and I laughed so hard I cried. "This is ours, Alice," he whispered into my hair. "No landlord, no rent, just ours." We raised 3 children in that house. Michael, my oldest, was born in the bedroom upstairs during a snowstorm because we couldn't make it to the hospital in time. I can still see Robert pacing the hallway, praying loud enough to wake the neighbors. That house held birthday parties and scraped knees, Christmas mornings and quiet Sunday dinners. When Robert died 6 years ago, cancer took him slow and cruel. I thought I'd never feel whole again. But I stayed in that house because it still smelled like him. Like coffee and Old Spice and the lavender soap I used to wash his shirts. Michael visited sometimes after his father passed. He'd sit at the kitchen table, same seat he sat in as a boy, and we'd talk about his dad. He'd tell me I was strong, that I was handling everything so well. I believed him because I wanted to, because he was my son, and sons don't lie to their mothers about things like that. Then he met her. Veronica. That's my daughter-in-law's name, though I try not to say it too often anymore. She came into Michael's life like a summer storm, loud, flashy, and gone before you could catch your breath. She worked in real estate, always dressed like she was heading to some important meeting even when she was just going to the grocery store. Hair perfect, nails perfect, smile sharp as glass. The first time Michael brought her to the house, she walked through every room with her arms crossed, lips pressed tight like she was inspecting a condemned building. "It's cozy," she said, her voice dripping with something I couldn't quite name. "It's home," I replied, pouring her tea she didn't drink. Michael married her 8 months later. I wore my best dress to the wedding and smiled in all the photos, even though something in my chest felt heavy. Robert used to say I had good instincts about people. "You feel things, Alice," he'd tell me. "Don't ignore that." I should have listened to his memory. I should have trusted that tightness in my stomach every time Veronica looked at me like I was a problem she needed to solve. Started small. Little comments. Little suggestions. "You know, Alice, this house is awfully big for just one person. Have you thought about what would happen if you fell? Who would find you?" Michael and I have been talking. Maybe it's time to think about your future. About being practical. Practical. That word became her favorite. She'd say it with a sympathetic tilt of her head, like she was doing me a favor by pointing out how old and helpless I was. And Michael, my Michael, who used to hold my hand crossing the street when he was small, started echoing her words. Started looking at me the way you look at furniture you're thinking of replacing. Then came the day they sat me down. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March. I remember because the daffodils were just starting to bloom in the front yard, and I'd been planning to cut some for the kitchen table. Michael and Veronica showed up unannounced, which wasn't unusual. But this time, Veronica carried a leather folder. She set it on the table between us like a centerpiece. "Mom," Michael began, and I noticed he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "We've been worried about you." "Worried?" I looked between them. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Healthy as a horse." "That's wonderful." Veronica cut in, smooth as silk. "But Michael and I have been thinking about the future. This house is a lot of responsibility. The taxes, the maintenance, the utilities. It's expensive. And you're living on a fixed income." "I manage just fine," I said quietly. "For now." She opened the folder, slid some papers toward me. "But what about later? What if something happens? What if you need medical care? We want to help you, Alice. We want to make sure you're taken care of." I stared at the papers. Legal documents, dense with words I didn't fully understand. Deed transfer, power of attorney, terms and conditions that blurred together under the kitchen light. "What is this?" I asked. "It's a way to protect the house," Michael said, finally looking at me. But his eyes were pleading, desperate. "If we put the house in my name, you can still live here. Nothing changes for you. But if something happens, if you get sick or need to go into a care facility, the house won't be taken to pay for it. It'll stay in the family. For your grandkids someday." My grandkids. Michael and Veronica didn't have children yet, but the promise of them hung in the air like bait. "You'd still live here, Mom," Michael continued. "This is your home. We'd never take that from you. This is just paperwork. Just being smart." Veronica smiled at me. Warm, reassuring, predatory. I should have said no. I should have asked for time, called a lawyer, talked to someone who wasn't sitting across from me with rehearsed lines and impatient eyes. But I was tired. Tired of being alone. Tired of second-guessing everyone's intentions. And God forgive me, I wanted to believe my son wouldn't hurt me. "Where do I sign?" I asked. Veronica's smile widened. She handed me a pen. I signed. 3 different pages. My hand shook on the last one, but I told myself it was just the arthritis. They left 20 minutes later, folder tucked under Veronica's arm like a trophy. Michael kissed my cheek at the door. "You did the right thing, Mom," he whispered. "I promise." I stood in the doorway and watched them drive away. The daffodils swayed in the breeze. The house felt quieter than usual. And somewhere deep in my chest, beneath the hope and the love and the exhaustion, a small voice whispered, "What have you done, Alice?" That night, I sat in Robert's chair and stared at the empty spaces on the walls where our wedding photos used to hang. I'd taken them down after he died because looking at them hurt too much. But now I wished I could see his face. I wished I could ask him if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. The house creaked and settled around me, familiar as breath. But for the first time in 43 years, it didn't feel like mine anymore. I didn't know it yet, but I just handed my son the keys to my own destruction. And he was already planning to use them. They say you never really know someone until money enters the picture. I used to think that was cynical talk, something bitter people said to justify their loneliness. But now I know better. Money doesn't change people, children. It just reveals who they've been all along. And what I saw in my son's eyes 3 months after I signed those papers, well, it wasn't the boy I raised. It was a stranger wearing his face. The first sign came on a Saturday morning in June. I was in the garden, pulling weeds from around the tomato plants, when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Not Michael's car. I knew the sound of his engine like I knew my own heartbeat. This was something bigger, shinier. I stood up, wiping dirt from my hands, and saw Veronica stepping out of a silver SUV. Knew by the looks of it. She wore sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Michael got out from the passenger side. He didn't smile. "Morning, sweetheart," I called out. trying to keep my voice light. Didn't know you were coming by. I would have made coffee. We need to talk, Mom, Michael said. His voice was flat, rehearsed. Something cold slithered down my spine. I followed them into the house, my house, and watched as they sat down at the kitchen table like they owned the place. Which I suppose they did now. I just hadn't understood what that meant yet. Veronica folded her hands on the table, those long red nails clicking against the wood. Alice, we've been doing a lot of thinking, and we've come to a difficult decision. We think it's time, Michael added, still not looking at me. Time for you to find somewhere else to live. The words hung in the air like smoke. I blinked at them, certain I'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? This house is too much for you? Veronica continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. The upkeep, the stairs, the yard work. We've been watching you struggle, and it's just not safe anymore. You're getting older, Alice. You need to be somewhere with support. Maybe a nice retirement community. Somewhere with activities and nurses on site. I don't need a nurse, I said slowly, my voice shaking. I need my home. Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be, Michael said, finally meeting my eyes. But there was no warmth there, no recognition, just impatience. The house is in my name now. Legally, it's mine. And Veronica and we need the space. We're planning to start a family, and this neighborhood, these schools. You're kicking me out. The words felt like broken glass in my mouth. You're kicking me out of my own house. It's not your house anymore, Veronica said softly, almost gently. Remember? You signed it over. For protection for your future. Well, now we're protecting it. We're protecting our investment. Investment. She called my home. The place where I birthed my son. Where I buried my grief. Where every floorboard held a memory. An investment. Michael. I reached across the table toward my son, my voice breaking. Sweetheart, please. This is where you grew up. This is where your father. Dad's gone, Mom. His words were sharp, final. And you need to accept that this isn't about sentiment. This is about what makes sense. Veronica and I have already looked at some facilities. Nice places. Clean. Safe. We'll help you move. We'll even cover the first month's rent. How generous. How incredibly, breathtakingly generous. I sat back in my chair and looked at my son. Really looked at him. When had he become this person? When had his heart turned to stone? Or had I just been too blind to see it? Too desperate to believe that the child I'd rocked to sleep during thunderstorms. The boy who'd cried when his goldfish died. The young man who'd promised to always take care of me. Had I imagined all of that love? When? I asked quietly. What? When do you want me out? Veronica smiled, relieved that I wasn't going to fight. We were thinking end of the month. That gives you 3 weeks. Plenty of time to pack and find somewhere suitable. 3 weeks. 21 days to erase 43 years. I understand, I said, standing up on shaking legs. I'll start looking. Michael looked surprised, maybe even disappointed that I wasn't putting up more resistance. Maybe he'd wanted me to beg. Maybe Veronica had coached him on how to handle my tears, my pleading. But I gave them neither. Thank you for being reasonable, Alice, Veronica said, standing and smoothing her designer blouse. This really is for the best. You'll see. They left. I watched from the window as they drove away in their shiny new SUV. Purchased, no doubt, with money they'd saved by planning to steal my home. When their car disappeared around the corner, I walked through every room of that house. I touched the walls where my children's height marks still faintly showed beneath layers of paint. I stood in the kitchen where Robert had danced with me on our anniversary. I sat on the edge of the bed where I'd held him as he took his last breath. And then I stopped crying, stopped shaking. Stopped being the sad, helpless old woman they thought I was. They wanted this house? They wanted to erase me like I was nothing? Fine. but they were going to learn something my Robert used to say. Be careful what you take from someone who has nothing left to lose. That afternoon, I called the bank. Maple Street Credit Union, where Robert and I had done our banking for 40 years. I asked to speak with someone about taking out a loan against the property. The young man on the phone was cheerful, helpful. Of course, Mrs. Patterson. When would you like to come in? Tomorrow morning, I said. First thing. I spent that evening doing research. I called legal aid. I read articles online about property rights and deed transfers. And slowly, carefully, a plan began to form. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't kind. But then again, neither was what my son had done to me. By Monday morning, I was sitting in a small office at the credit union, across from a loan officer named David. He was young, couldn't have been more than 30, with kind eyes and a wedding ring that looked freshly polished. Mrs. Patterson, I see here that you've owned your home for over 40 years. That's wonderful. And you're looking to take out a home equity loan. A large one, I said calmly. The maximum amount the property will support. David's eyebrows raised slightly. May I ask what you're planning to use the funds for? I smiled at him. A real smile, maybe the first genuine one I'd managed in months. Charity, I said. There are people in this world who actually need help, and I'd like to give it to them before I die. It wasn't a lie. Not entirely. He processed the paperwork. Within a week, I had access to $180,000. Nearly the full value of the house after decades of appreciation. The money sat in my account like a loaded gun. Michael called that Tuesday. Mom, just checking in. How's the packing going? Fine, sweetheart, I said sweetly. Just fine. I didn't tell him about the bank. I didn't tell him about the plan forming in my mind like storm clouds on the horizon. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a pen and paper, writing out the names of charities, women's shelters, food banks, children's hospitals, organizations that helped people who'd been abandoned, forgotten, thrown away. People like me. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock Robert had hung in the hallway 30 years ago. In 2 weeks, Michael and Veronica would expect me to be gone. In 2 weeks, they'd walk through that door thinking they'd won. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that I'd already decided something. If I couldn't have this house, neither would they. I just had to make sure the bank got there first. Revenge is a dish best served cold, they say. But I didn't want revenge, child. I wanted justice. There's a difference. Revenge is about hurting someone because they hurt you. Justice is about making sure they can't hurt anyone else. And as I sat in that bank office signing away every penny tied to that house, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Powerful. Not cruel. Not vindictive. Just awake. Finally, blessedly awake. The money transferred on a Thursday. $180,000, minus the closing costs and fees. I watched the numbers appear in my account on the bank's computer screen, and for a moment I just stared. That was my entire life, converted into digits. Every double shift Robert worked. Every coupon I clipped. Every sacrifice we made so our children could have birthday parties and new school clothes. And now I was going to give it all away. Mrs. Patterson? David, the loan officer, looked at me with concern. Are you all right? We can take a break if you need. I'm fine, dear, I said, patting his hand. Better than fine. Now, let me show you the list. I spent 2 weeks researching. The women's shelter on Oak Street that helped mothers escape domestic violence. They got $30,000. The food bank that fed hungry children every summer. $25,000. The hospice center that had cared for Robert in his final days with such tenderness. $40,000. On and on down the list, dividing up my life savings among people who would actually use it to do good in this world. The organizations were shocked. Some cried when I called them. The director of the women's shelter couldn't stop thanking me, saying this would change lives, save lives even. And I believed her. Because if my pain could become someone else's hope, then maybe, just maybe, something good could come from all this heartbreak. By Friday afternoon, my account was nearly empty. I kept $3,000 for myself, enough to rent a small apartment and start over. The rest was gone, scattered like seeds to places where it could actually grow into something beautiful. And then I stopped paying the mortgage. The first missed payment went unnoticed. Michael and Veronica were too busy measuring rooms and picking out paint colors for their house. I saw them drive by twice that week, slowing down to look at the property like proud new owners inspecting their prize. I waved from the porch, smiled sweetly, watered my tomatoes. The second missed payment triggered a letter from the bank. A polite notice reminding the property owner, Michael, technically, since the deed was in his name, that payment was overdue. I saw him pull that letter from the mailbox one afternoon, watched his face change as he read it, watched him look up at the house, then at me sitting in my rocking chair, then back at the letter. He came to the door 20 minutes later, Veronica trailing behind him. Mom, did you take out a loan? His voice was tight, controlled, dangerous. I did, I said calmly, not getting up from my chair. A rather large one, actually. Asterisk why? Asterisk, Veronica nearly shrieked. Why would you do that? Because I could, dear. The house was still in my name when I applied. Everything was legal and proper. The bank was very helpful. Michael's face went pale. Where's the money, Mom? Gone. I rocked gently, the chair creaking on the old wooden porch. I gave it away, every penny, to people who needed it more than I do. You gave away $180,000? Michael's voice cracked. That's our money. That's the house's value. How could you? Your money. I stopped rocking and looked at my son. Really looked at him. Funny how it's your house when you want to kick me out, but it's your money when I do something you don't like. You can't have it both ways, sweetheart. Veronica's face had gone red, ugly with rage. You stupid, senile old woman. Do you have any idea what you've done? That was our equity, our future, your investment. I finished for her. Yes, I remember. Well, I invested it differently. In people who won't throw their mothers out on the street. We could sue you, Michael said quietly. For fraud. For what? I leaned forward. For taking out a legal loan on a property I was still entitled to borrow against. Go ahead, Michael. Call your lawyer. Let's see what they say. But while you're at it, you might want to figure out how you're going to pay that mortgage. Because I'm certainly not going to. And unless you've got $180,000 lying around, the bank is going to come calling in about, 90 days. The color drained from Veronica's face. You're bluffing. You wouldn't. I already did, I said softly. I already did, and there's nothing you can do about it. You wanted this house so badly? Well, now it comes with a debt you can't pay. Enjoy. They left without another word. But I heard Veronica screaming at Michael all the way to their car. Heard words like, stupid, and your fault, and worthless. I went back to rocking. The tomatoes still needed watering. The third missed payment brought a phone call. Then a certified letter. Then a man in a suit who knocked on the door looking for Michael Patterson, the property owner. He doesn't live here, I told him pleasantly. I'm just the former owner. But you're welcome to leave your card. The man looked confused. Looked at his paperwork. Looked back at me. Ma'am, are you aware that this property is entering foreclosure proceedings? I am, I said. Very aware. By month 4, Michael and Veronica had hired a lawyer. They tried to argue that I'd acted fraudulently, that I'd damaged their property interests. But the bank didn't care about their family drama. The bank cared about one thing, money. And since Michael's name was on the deed, Michael was responsible for the debt. A debt he couldn't pay. I'd already found a small apartment across town. 1 bedroom, clean and quiet, with a landlady who reminded me of my sister. I packed slowly, carefully, wrapping Robert's coffee mug in newspaper, folding the quilt his mother had made us as a wedding present. I took the things that mattered, the photos, the love letters, the memories you can hold in your hands. The house? The walls and floors and rooms that Michael wanted so desperately? I left them for the bank. The foreclosure sale was scheduled for a Tuesday in October. I didn't attend, but I heard about it later from a neighbor. Michael and Veronica showed up, tried to argue with the bank officers, tried to stop the sale. But numbers don't lie, and debts don't forgive. The house sold for $195,000 to a young couple with a baby on the way. The bank took their money to cover the loan. Michael and Veronica got nothing. Not the house. Not the equity. Not even the satisfaction of knowing they'd won. They got exactly what they tried to give me. Nothing. I saw Michael one last time before I moved. He showed up at my new apartment, looking 20 years older than he had 6 months ago. His eyes were hollow, defeated. "Mom," he said, standing in my doorway. I don't understand. How could you do this? I'm your son." I looked at him for a long moment. This man who'd grown in my body, who I'd loved more than my own life, who'd become someone I didn't recognize. "Yes," I said quietly. "You are my son, and I will always love you. But love doesn't mean letting you destroy me, Michael. Love doesn't mean being your victim. We could have worked something out. We could have. You could have let me stay." I interrupted, my voice steady. "You could have honored your father's memory and the woman who raised you. But you didn't. You chose her. You chose money. You chose cruelty. So I chose myself. For the first time in my life, I chose me." He stood there, tears running down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know," I said. "But sorry doesn't give me back what you took. It just makes you feel better about taking it." I closed the door. That night, I made tea in my new kitchen and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. My apartment was small, quiet, nothing like the house that had held my whole life. But it was mine, truly mine, and no one could take it from me. Some people thought I was cruel, vindictive. They said I'd destroyed my own son's future out of spite. But they didn't understand. I didn't destroy his future. I just refused to let him build it on the ruins of mine. The house on Maple Street belongs to that young couple now. I drive by sometimes and see toys in the yard, flowers in the garden, life spilling out the windows. And I smile, because that's what a home should be. Not a weapon, not an investment, not a prize to be stolen, just a place where love lives. And may they fill it with more love than greed. Thank you for walking this journey with me, dear ones. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Grandma Alice Stories. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a tale, because every story carries a lesson, and every lesson carries love. Until next time, remember, the only thing more powerful than greed is the courage to let go.